That moment is seared into my brain, replaying over and over, no matter how hard I try to shake it. Olivia had excused herself to the restroom, leaving her phone right there on the table next to her glass of wine, which she'd barely touched. My gut had been churning all evening, a sickening feeling that wouldn't let go. Every instinct in my body was yelling that something wasn't right, and I couldn't push it aside. I'd been watching them the entire night, Caleb leaning in closer than he should whenever she spoke, his hand hovering on her back just a beat too long. I was barely holding myself together, gripping my scotch glass so tightly that I genuinely thought it might shatter in my hands. They acted like no one noticed, like their little game was invisible, but I saw it all, every single detail. So when she disappeared to the restroom, I did something completely out of character for me. I grabbed her phone. My hands were trembling like crazy. Can you believe it? Me, a guy who makes a living dissecting complex legal arguments, shaking like some kid about to ask out his first crush. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Really, part of me was praying I'd find nothing and feel like an idiot later. Maybe I could laugh at myself for being paranoid. But deep down, I knew the truth. I felt it in my bones. I unlocked her phone. Of course, I knew the passcode. We were married, after all. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst as I scrolled through her messages, trying to make sense of it all. Most of what I saw was harmless chatter. Texts from coworkers, friends, nothing out of the ordinary. But I couldn't stop, couldn't look away. My eyes raced over each message, my breath quick and shallow, silently pleading that there'd be nothing to find. And then I saw it, a message from Caleb of all people. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough. Can't wait to see you tonight, with a winking emoji tacked on at the end. 7 words. Just 7 measly words, but they hit me like a freight train. A text like that could easily be brushed off as friendly, right? But not with that damn wink. That wink told a different story, and it tore through me like a blade. My hands went cold as I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. I kept scrolling, desperate to find some explanation, some context that would make it all make sense. But the more I read, the worse it became. The messages weren't explicit, they were smarter than that. But the subtext was glaringly clear. Inside jokes, playful, flirty remarks that only they'd understand. Phrases like, "Remember last time winking face?" and "Hope we pick a better spot tonight." It didn't take a genius to see what was happening. I sat there frozen, staring at her phone, feeling like the ground beneath me was crumbling into nothingness. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, my life, my marriage, was disintegrating right in front of me. You ever see those scenes in movies where time slows down and the main character just stares off into space? That was me. My entire world was imploding, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. I reread that message more times than I could count, trying to make it mean something else, something innocent. My heart raced like crazy, and sweat made my hands slick against the phone. The noise of the party around me faded into the background, leaving only the pounding of my pulse in my ears. For one insane moment, I even thought about putting the phone back and pretending I hadn't seen anything. Maybe I was just reading too much into it, right? Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't nothing. This wasn't harmless. This was betrayal, raw and unforgiving, and it stared me in the face. Olivia returned, smiling as if nothing was wrong, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She asked if I wanted another drink, her tone light and cheerful, like she hadn't just torn my world apart. I slid her phone back onto the table before she could see me holding it, forcing a weak smile and nodding like everything was fine. But inside, I was boiling, ready to burst. My throat tightened, my chest ached, and I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I couldn't. Not yet. That's when I realized our marriage was hanging on by a thread, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to save it. I sat there, my heart hammering away, staring at her, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. I needed proof. That damn message haunted me, but I wasn't ready to accuse her outright. What if I was wrong? What if my mind was just running wild? I told myself I might be overreacting, but deep down I already knew better. I just couldn't face it. Not yet. So one evening, when Olivia claimed she had to work late again, I decided to follow her. Yeah, I know, it sounds like some cheap spy movie. But at that point, I was desperate. She'd been throwing out excuses for weeks. Late meetings, big projects, client emergencies. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But that night, I wasn't buying it anymore. I waited until she left, her heels clicking confidently down the driveway, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. I gave her a few minutes to get ahead, then grabbed my keys and followed her. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst as I kept a careful distance, making sure she wouldn't notice me. And, surprise, surprise, she didn't head to the office. No, she drove downtown. Alarm bells went off in my head. Why the hell would she need to be downtown for work? After about 20 minutes, she pulled into the parking lot of a small, shady hotel, the kind of place where people go to disappear for a few hours. My stomach sank as I parked a little ways down the street, close enough to keep an eye on her but far enough to avoid being seen. I watched as she stepped out of the car, glancing around nervously like she was checking to make sure no one was watching. And then he appeared, Caleb, my so-called best friend, walking toward her like he didn't have a care in the world. He strolled right up to her, wrapped his arm around her waist, and kissed her. Not a quick peck, not something innocent, but a deep, slow kiss. A kiss that screamed routine. The way they moved together, the way they fit, it was clear this wasn't their first time. Not by a long shot. I sat there, frozen, watching my wife betray me. The woman I had loved for over a decade was in the arms of my best friend, my brother. They stood together for what felt like an eternity, lost in each other, completely unaware I was just yards away, seeing everything. It wasn't just humiliating, it was shattering. I felt like the biggest fool alive, like all the years we'd spent together, every memory, was a cruel lie, and I was the blind idiot who never saw it coming. The pain was unbearable, like something tearing into me with every passing second. But beneath the pain, there was something darker. Anger. No, anger wasn't the right word. I was seething with fury. And yet, as I watched them walk toward the hotel entrance, laughing softly like they didn't have a care in the world, I didn't lose control. Not then. Not yet. I wanted to storm out, confront them right there, shout at them, hit Caleb, drag Olivia out in shame. But I knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. That would have been too easy for them. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. So I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel, every nerve in my body shaking with barely contained rage. I wasn't going to let them win. I refused to be the guy who gets cheated on and just accepts it. No way. They were going to pay for this. But I needed time to think, to plan. So I sat there and watched them disappear into the hotel, fully aware of what was about to happen inside. Instead of confronting them, I turned the key in the ignition and drove away. Revenge began to form in my mind, slow and deliberate. This wasn't something to rush. If I was going to make them suffer, I needed to be smart. From that moment, I became a shadow, always watching, never seen, gathering everything I needed. The first step was to gather proof. Olivia had developed a predictable routine, always stepping outside to take her work calls, where I couldn't hear. So I crossed a line I never thought I would. I installed spyware on her phone. A client of mine, a tech-savvy guy, had once shown me a program that could track calls and messages. I set it up on her phone and started listening. On nights she said she was working late, I followed her, hanging back just far enough to watch her meet Caleb at one of their usual spots. Every bit of evidence I gathered fueled the fire inside me. But I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. Simply exposing them would have been too easy. Sure, I could have told everyone and caused a scandal, but scandals fade. They would have found a way to move on. No, I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. The same humiliation. The same crushing pain that had been eating me alive since the first time I saw them together. They needed to suffer, and I was going to make sure they did. Then one day, I got an unexpected call from Emma, Lucas's wife. It had been weeks since we last spoke. Emma and Lucas always seemed like the perfect couple, at least from the outside. If Olivia's betrayal blindsided me, I couldn't imagine what Emma was going through. When she called, her voice was calm, But there was something beneath it, a hesitation, like she didn't quite know how to say what was on her mind. After a few moments of small talk, she finally came out with it. "Liam, do you think Lucas might be seeing someone?" Her voice cracked just slightly, enough to make my chest tighten. How was I supposed to answer that? She was just starting to put the pieces together, while I already knew the whole ugly truth. I couldn't just unload all of it on her right then. So I stayed quiet for a moment, trying to figure out how to respond. She kept talking, as if my silence gave her permission to share everything. She told me how Lucas had been working late, how distant he'd become, and how she couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to be that suspicious wife. But the signs were there, and she couldn't ignore them anymore. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to just say it. Lucas is cheating, and he's doing it with my wife. But something stopped me. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I didn't want to see her break down the way I had when I first found out. So I just listened, letting her get everything off her chest. And then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Liam," she said softly, her voice shaking just a little, "do you think he's seeing someone?" Her words hung in the air, and I knew I couldn't lie. Not anymore. This secret had been eating away at me for too long. Even though she couldn't see me, I felt the weight of my answer pressing down on me as I finally spoke. "Yeah," I said. "Ido." There was a pause, heavy and tense. I could almost hear her putting it all together. But instead of breaking down, she surprised me. "Let's meet," she said. The next day, we met at a quiet cafe. I got there first, and when she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Emma, who always seemed so composed, looked worn out, like she hadn't slept in days. She sat across from me, avoiding eye contact, her fingers stirring her coffee nervously, as if searching for answers in the swirling liquid. We didn't know where to start, so we just sat in silence for a while, the tension between us growing heavier by the second. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but full of emotion. "He's been different, Liam. Distant. Always making excuses. It's like he's not really here anymore." Her words hit me hard. I could see the pain written all over her face. I wanted to shield her from the truth, to soften the blow somehow. But when she looked up at me, her eyes pleading for answers, I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Yes," I said, the words heavy and final. "Ido. I think he is," I admitted, my voice unsteady, heavy with the weight of the moment. "And I think it's with Olivia." Her expression shifted in an instant. The sadness that had been etched across her face hardened into something sharper, colder. But she didn't break down. She didn't cry. Instead, her jaw tightened, and her gaze sharpened with a fierce resolve that I hadn't anticipated. Leaning forward, she spoke in a low, measured tone. "Then let's make them pay." Her words hit me like a slap, but instead of hurting, they ignited something inside me, a burning determination. This wasn't about wallowing in self-pity anymore. This wasn't about licking our wounds. She wanted revenge, and for the first time since my life had unraveled, I realized I wasn't alone in this. We were in it together. In that moment, we stopped being victims. We became allies, bound by betrayal, ready to take back control of our shattered lives. I nodded, feeling my focus sharpen as the beginnings of a plan started forming in my head. Lucas and Olivia wouldn't know what hit them. From that night forward, Emma and I started meeting regularly. At first, it was all about strategizing, figuring out how to catch them in the act. But as the days turned into weeks, something else began to grow between us. Beneath the planning, there was an unspoken connection. We were two people brought to the edge of despair by the ones we trusted most, and in our shared pain, we found a strange solace in each other. Emma understood me in a way no one else could. We spent hours together, venting, scheming, letting the anger flow freely. She'd unload about Lucas, and I'd let my bitterness about Olivia spill out. But there was always an undercurrent, something simmering just below the surface, waiting for the right moment to boil over. One evening, Emma came over to my house. It had become a routine of sorts: dinners, late-night conversations, and meticulous planning. But that night, there was a different energy in the air. I cooked a simple meal, though I could barely focus on it. The atmosphere between us felt charged, alive. We talked about our plans, about how we'd make Lucas and Olivia regret every moment of their betrayal. But there was something deeper, unspoken, in the silence that followed. Emma looked stunning that night. Her dark hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, which had so often been clouded with sadness, now sparkled with something fierce and untamed. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her figure in a way that made it impossible for me not to notice. I tried to focus on the conversation, on our shared mission, but my attention kept drifting to her lips, the curve of her neck, the way her voice softened when she spoke. After dinner, neither of us moved from the table. The silence wasn't awkward this time. It was thick, electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. I could feel her eyes on me, and when I finally met her gaze, it was like the rest of the world faded away. In that moment, it was just the two of us. "Liam," she whispered, her voice soft but trembling with emotion. "We're just as much cheaters as they are." Her words hit me hard, a gut punch that I hadn't expected. She was right. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. We were caught in the same storm, both drowning in betrayal and anger. Before I could respond, she leaned closer, her hand brushing my shoulder. Her touch sent a jolt through me. "I can't keep pretending," she continued, her voice heavy with emotion. "I can't keep this inside anymore." Her hand lingered on my shoulder, warm and steady, and I felt an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that drew me to her. We both knew what was happening, what was about to happen. A small part of me hesitated, wanting to stop before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But another part of me, the part that was tired of pain, tired of loneliness, urged me forward. I leaned in, our faces mere inches apart, and before I could think twice, our lips met in a kiss that was raw and desperate. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was fierce, urgent, a collision of all the pain and anger we had been carrying. Her lips were warm, her breath shaky, and as I pulled her closer, I felt the tension in her body give way. We didn't stop. I grabbed her by the waist, pulling her into my lap, and she responded instantly, her hands threading through my hair, holding me tighter. We stumbled toward the couch, our bodies pressed together in a tangle of limbs. It wasn't just about lust. It was an eruption of everything we had been holding back. Our anger, our hurt, our longing for something real in the midst of all the lies. Her dress slipped off effortlessly, and soon we were moving together with a frantic intensity, as if trying to fill the emptiness inside each other. Her moans filled the room as we moved from the couch to the floor, then to the bedroom and even the bathroom. Neither of us wanted to stop, neither of us willing to let go of the escape we had found in each other. The sex was wild, chaotic, a whirlwind of emotion and desire. For those few hours, everything else disappeared. I wasn't thinking about Olivia or Lucas. I wasn't consumed by revenge or the weight of betrayal. In those moments, there was only Emma, her body, her warmth, her voice in my ear. But when it was over, and I lay there in the quiet aftermath, the weight of what we had done came crashing down on me. Emma was asleep beside me, her body curled against mine, but I couldn't close my eyes. The truth was gnawing at me. I had betrayed Olivia, yes, but more than that, I had betrayed myself. I had crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. I had become the very thing I despised. No amount of revenge could ever make me feel whole again. After that night, things between Emma and me shifted. We continued seeing each other, but there was a tension now, a constant fear that we'd be caught, that everything would spiral out of control. The passion was still there, but so was the unease. We were playing with fire and we both knew it. And yet, despite everything, Emma was the one person who truly understood me. With her, I didn't have to pretend. She saw me for who I really was, broken pieces and all. As much as Emma and I tried to stay focused on our plan to expose Lucas and Olivia and make them pay, the lines between revenge and our own emotions kept blurring. Every meeting between us was charged with tension, guilt mixing with passion and something darker. But even with all the complications, neither of us could walk away. We were too far in, entangled in a mess neither of us could resist. At the same time, things with Olivia were unraveling completely. We barely exchanged words anymore. And when we did, it was as if I were talking to a stranger. The warmth that had once defined our relationship was long gone, replaced by cold indifference. Our conversations had become flat and transactional, like we were two strangers forced to coexist in the same space. I couldn't take it any longer. I was done pretending to be the oblivious husband. I had seen too much, felt too much. I wasn't about to be the one walking away with my head down. No, if anyone was going to come out of this with their dignity intact, it would be me. After everything I had discovered about her affair with Lucas, I was ready to take charge. It was time to act decisively. Then the call came, the one that changed everything. It was my private investigator. After weeks of following them, he finally delivered what I had been waiting for. Undeniable proof. A folder stuffed with photos, videos, and screenshots of their conversations. There it all was, Olivia and Lucas caught red-handed at the hotel. Everything I needed to confront Olivia and to ensure I held all the leverage in court. I wasn't about to play fair. Not now, not ever. When I held that folder in my hands, something inside me shifted. The waiting was over. It was time to take control. Olivia wouldn't be manipulating the situation any longer. This was my move and I was ready to make it count. That evening I set the stage. I made dinner, nothing too elaborate, just enough to make it seem like any other night. I poured wine, lit candles, and waited. I kept myself calm, determined to give nothing away. When Olivia came home, I could see suspicion in her eyes immediately. She hesitated in the doorway, scanning the room like she knew something was off. But she sat down anyway, took a sip of wine, and forced a smile. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart pounded. She gripped her glass tightly, her fingers tense. I started off slow, casual, lulling her into thinking this was just another conversation. But as soon as she started spinning excuses, trying to explain her late nights and pretend nothing was wrong, I pulled out the photos. One by one, I laid them on the table in front of her. The first photo showed Olivia and Lucas standing too close together in the hotel parking lot. Another caught them holding hands, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world. And then, the final photo, the one that left no room for doubt, a shot of them kissing outside the hotel. Olivia's face went pale as she stared at the pictures. Her hands trembled as she reached for the evidence, her voice cracking when she finally managed to speak. "How could you do this?" she shouted, a mix of fear and anger in her tone. But there was no guilt in her eyes. She was furious at being caught, not remorseful for what she had done. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. I looked her dead in the eye and spoke with a cold, deliberate calm. "You're the one who betrayed us, Olivia. Not me." The weight of my words seemed to crush her. She sat there frozen, her face a mix of shock and denial. Then I delivered the final blow. "I'm filing for divorce. And, just so you know, I've already spoken to my lawyer." Her reaction was exactly what I had expected, stunned silence. She had never thought I'd be the one to take control. She had assumed she could manipulate me, maybe even turn the tables in her favor. But now she saw how wrong she'd been. I wasn't the naive husband she had underestimated. I held all the cards, evidence, leverage, and the upper hand. The next day, I made good on my promise. I filed for divorce, armed with everything I needed to ensure a victory. I hired one of the top divorce lawyers in the city, someone who was known for being ruthless and relentless. Together, we set out to make sure Olivia walked away with as little as possible. I demanded my share of our assets, the house, the cars, the investments. But more than that, I made sure to secure full control over the financial aspects of our lives. If this was going to end, it would end on my terms. Once the divorce papers were filed, the fallout was swift. Olivia, desperate to protect her reputation, was left scrambling. But it was too late. The news of her affair with Lucas spread quickly, and her professional life took a nosedive. Several of her clients, unwilling to be associated with the scandal, dropped her. She was drowning, and there was no one to save her. And Lucas? He didn't escape unscathed either. Emma saw to that. At first, she stayed quiet, letting me take the lead with Olivia. But once I filed for divorce, she struck with precision. She filed her own case, ensuring that Lucas's affair and neglect were laid bare for everyone to see. She didn't just take him down personally. She destroyed him professionally, too. Emma and I weren't done, though. We worked together to dismantle Lucas's business empire. While he was distracted by his personal fallout, I struck deals with his clients, bringing them over to my side. His business began to crumble, contracts slipping through his fingers, lawsuits piling up. He had no way out. Watching Lucas and Olivia spiral into chaos brought a satisfaction I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving to myself that I wouldn't let them break me. I had taken control and I had won. But somewhere in the middle of all this, my relationship with Emma shifted. We met again, this time not to discuss revenge or celebrate our victories. There was something deeper between us now. The raw, angry passion of the early days had softened into something more meaningful. The sex changed, too. It wasn't wild or reckless anymore. It was tender, emotional. Emma understood me in ways no one else ever had. She saw me for who I was, flaws and all, and didn't turn away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a real partner by my side. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. I walked away with the house, the assets, and my future intact. Olivia, on the other hand, was left with nothing. Her betrayal had cost her everything. Her marriage, her career, and the life we had built together. As for Lucas, he was drowning in the wreckage Emma and I had left behind. With his reputation destroyed and his debts mounting, he had no one left to turn to. He was reaping what he had sown. Emma and I no longer had to hide. Our relationship went public, and we didn't care what anyone thought. We had survived the storm, and together we were building something real. We weren't just two broken people seeking revenge anymore. We were partners moving forward, leaving Lucas and Olivia behind. As I stood there, reflecting on everything I had gained, my freedom, my business, and my future with Emma, I felt nothing but triumph. I had played the game smart, calculating every move, and I didn't regret a single decision.